Hey guys, what's up? This is Josh Carson, and welcome to History in a Flash. Today we are going to be covering part one of World War II. So let's jump right into it. So we're going to start out in Germany, just talking about Hitler. Hitler is originally Austrian, and he fought in World War One. Before then, he considered becoming an artist. And after World War One, he joined the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or the Nazi Party. He attempted the beer hall putsch in 1923, which essentially means he attempted to seize power in Munich, for which he was arrested and imprisoned. After getting out of prison, he wrote Mein Kampf, which explained his belief in Aryans as the superior race, explained his belief in Lebensraum, which is the need for Germans' living space, and he explained that he was anti-Semitic, which means anti-Jewish. After his release from prison, he gained support for the Nazi Party, and the Nazi message became increasingly appealing after the severe depression hit. During that time, Nazis gained a seat in parliament. Hitler ran for president against von Hindenburg in 1932 and lost. However, in 1933, von Hindenburg was persuaded to appoint Hitler to chancellor. Hitler continued to take over until von Hindenburg's death, which was when Hitler became Der Führer. And at the close of World War II, he committed suicide with his new wife, Eva Braun, on April 30th, 1945, when the Allied powers were closing in. Moving on to Italy, we have Mussolini, who was an elementary school teacher, and later he became a newspaper editor who founded the Fascist Party in 1919. He created the Black Shirts, which aided in the March on Rome in October 1922 when King Victor Emmanuel II stepped down and handed power to Mussolini. Mussolini's goal was to have a great, respected, and feared Italy. In 1935, Mussolini invaded Ethiopia. Mussolini also assisted Franco's fascist rise in Spain. Initially, he had a rocky relationship with Hitler and disapproved of Hitler's killing the Austrian fascist Dollfuss. As Allied troops invaded Italy, King Victor Emmanuel II removed Mussolini from power and had him arrested. October 13th, 1943, Italy switched sides and declared war on Germany, after which Hitler persuaded Mussolini to regain control. So Mussolini staged a revolt, but really hid behind German protection. Mussolini was shot and killed on April 27th, 1945, at which his body was hung in the streets and stoned. Moving on to Spain. Spain was a monarchy until 1931, and then it became a republic. Franco, a member of the Nationalist Party, participated in a coup d'etat against the populist government. The Nationalists were supported by Mussolini and then Hitler, and Stalin and the USSR helped Republicans. Spain was considered a practice for World War II, and they remained neutral during World War II as well. Moving on to Japan, Emperor Hirohito was emperor from 1926 to 1989. He was revered and essentially worshipped by his people. He encouraged suicide over submitting to his enemies. His involvement was questioned, and he was exonerated after the war. Hideki Tojo was the prime minister from 1941 to 1944. He was fascist and nationalist. He was the one who planned the Pearl Harbor attack, and then he resigned after losing Saipan to the U.S. in 1944. He tried to commit suicide. He actually tried to shoot himself in the chest, but missed somehow and shot himself in the stomach, to which the U.S. Essentially stitched him up and then hung him for his war crimes in 1948. So moving on to the USSR. The USSR was led by Joseph Stalin, who was a communist, not a fascist. He took over communist Soviet Union after the death of Lenin. He implemented 5 years plans to rapidly help the USSR industrialize. He collectivized farms, and he was acknowledged as a ruthless dictator. During the Great Purge, he removed political enemies, and he killed over 700,000 of his own people. He sent ethnic minorities and others to gulags or work camps. And he signed a non-aggression pact with Germany in order to gain territory in Eastern Europe. Germany then invaded Russia, and Russians retreated in a scorched earth policy. Over 23 million Russians died, and they lost 13.9% of population. After the war, Russia demanded spheres of influence in Eastern Europe, which would lead to the Cold War. Stalin eventually died of a stroke or possibly poison on March 5th, 1953. Moving on to Great Britain. Winston Churchill was Prime Minister of Great Britain from 1940 to 1945, and he was appointed after Neville Chamberlain resigned. Neville Chamberlain resigned because he had appeased Hitler, and Churchill was strongly opposed to the appeasement. Churchill is known for his tremendous rhetoric, particularly during the German attack during the Battle of Britain. And England, during this time, was victim to Operation Sea Lion, which was the Nazi plan to bomb England and then invade. However, the Royal Air Force and development of radar enabled British to withstand the attacks. Churchill gave an inspirational speech on May 13th, 1940, during which he said, you ask, what is our aim? I can answer in one word, victory. Victory at all costs. Victory in spite of all terror. Victory however long and hard the road may be, for without victory, there is no survival. Shortly thereafter, on October 29th, 1941, so I guess a year after, he said, surely from this period of 10 months, this is the lesson. Never give in. Never give in. Never, 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 never in. Nothing. Great or small, large or petty, never give in to accept to convictions of honor and good sense. Never yield to force. Never yield to the apparently overwhelming might of the enemy. Winston Churchill eventually died at age 90 in 1965. Moving on to the USA. FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, was elected in 1932, and he served 4 terms, which is now limited by the 22nd Amendment. During the Great Depression, he implemented New Deal programs, and he wanted to keep America neutral. He began supplying the Allies through the Lend-Lease Act, and he agreed to war versus Japan and Axis powers after Pearl Harbor, which he noted as a date which will live in infamy. During the war, unemployment decreased to 2%. He met with others in the Big Three during the war, which included Stalin and Churchill. He was reelected in 1944 with Harry Truman as vice president, and he died on April 12, 1945, of a stroke after experiencing declining health. After this, Harry Truman became president. Harry Truman was the one who decided to drop the atomic bombs on Japan. He assisted in building the United Nations. He disagreed with Stalin about post-war plans, which led to the Cold War, and he lost to Eisenhower in the 1952 election. So that'll do it for today, guys. Hope this video was informational, and I'll see you guys again next week.